always believed that Lily and I were inseparable. From childhood, we shared everything: secrets, dreams, even the occasional piece of clothing. Despite our differing styles, our bond seemed unbreakable, a constant in an ever-changing world. That's why it felt like a punch to the gut the day I learned she had betrayed me by selling the heirloom ring our grandmother had entrusted to both of us. Our grandmother's ring was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of our family history, passed down through generations to the eldest daughter. When it came time, it somehow ended up with Lily and me, which made me feel honored and trusted. The ring stayed locked in the safe we shared, a physical reminder of our grandmother's grace and resilience. I never thought Lily could see it as anything other than precious. It was a normal Tuesday morning when I first noticed it was missing. I had gone to the safe to retrieve some papers when I instinctively checked on the ring. A small velvet pouch where it should have been sat empty, and my heart sank as I realized the treasure was gone. Still, I clung to the hope that perhaps Lily had temporarily taken it for some reason I couldn't yet fathom. She'd never do anything to jeopardize such a significant piece of our legacy, would she? I approached Lily later that day, casually mentioning my concern over the missing ring. Her eyes widened for a split second before she plastered on a casual smile. "I haven't seen it," she said with practiced ease. A tiny seed of doubt planted itself in my mind, but I brushed it aside, unwilling to let suspicion poison my trust. For the next few days, I tried to let it rest, silently hoping the ring would reappear. In those tense, silent days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Lily was avoiding eye contact more than usual, always seeming to have somewhere else to be whenever our paths crossed. Our conversations were clipped, and there was a distance between us that had never been there before. I felt restless, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. One evening, while tidying up our shared desk, I found the last piece of the puzzle, a crumpled transaction receipt from a pawnshop buried under a stack of old mail. My stomach twisted as I read the details, the sinking realization setting in. Lily had sold the ring, our grandmother's ring, not for some noble cause or accident, but likely to fix her own financial woes. Confronting her felt inevitable yet daunting. My mind raced with all the things I wanted to say and ask. Why hadn't she come to me? How could she prioritize money over family? That evening, I sat her down, holding the receipt like a judge presenting evidence. Her face fell, and she couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't need to say a word. She knew I understood everything. Lily admitted she had been drowning in credit card debt, desperate and scared. "I thought I'd win it back," she confessed, voice barely audible. "I didn't see another way." My heart ached for her, but the betrayal stung more than I could express. I told her as much, trying to keep my voice steady. It wasn't just the ring, it was the trust she broke, the years of companionship tarnished by a choice she should have never made. She apologized, tears filling her eyes, but I knew words wouldn't be enough to mend what had been shattered. I needed to act, to retrieve the ring and restore our family's dignity, and perhaps teach Lily a lesson she wouldn't forget. The weight of responsibility felt heavy, but inaction wasn't an option. The next morning, I visited the pawnshop. The owner was a grizzled man with kind eyes behind his spectacles. I recounted the story with as much dignity as I could muster, explaining the importance of the ring not just to me, but to generations of women before me. He listened, nodding occasionally, and after a moment of silent contemplation, he agreed to hold the ring, giving me the chance to reclaim it. Returning home, knowing the heirloom was almost back in my possession, I felt a sense of relief. Yet, the reality of Lily's actions still lingered between us like a shadow. When she saw me with the ring, her eyes widened, disbelief morphing into a quiet understanding. She said nothing, just nodded, acknowledging her defeat. In the days that followed, I saw changes in Lily. She took up a second job, finally realizing the value of earning back what she had taken so carelessly. I decided to forgive her, believing in the strength of family ties, but forgiveness wasn't a free pass. I made sure she knew she'd have to repay what she owed to reclaim my trust fully. It was her burden to bear, made heavier by the love she almost lost. Through it all, I learned that trust, like a fragile heirloom, requires care and vigilance. I hoped Lily understood this too, now. Watching her determinedly work to repay the debt, I felt a sense of justice, not petty satisfaction. We were mending what was broken, stitch by careful stitch, and in restoring our family's treasure, my faith in her and us slowly rebuilt itself. I remember the day I realized the ring was missing. It was a Saturday, typical and uneventful, until I opened the safe where the ring was usually kept. I reached inside, expecting to feel the cool metal, the familiar weight of our grandmother's heirloom that had been passed down with such love and care. Instead, my fingers brushed against the empty fabric lining, and a chill ran through me. I tried to remain calm, but anxiety started to coil in my stomach. It seemed impossible that the ring could be gone. I retraced my steps, checked every nook and corner, but I already knew it was futile. The safe had been locked. Only Lily and I had the combination. When I finally confronted Lily, she was sitting at the kitchen table, lazily scrolling through her phone. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked if she'd seen the ring anywhere. Without even looking up, she shrugged, muttering something about it probably being misplaced. My heart sank at her nonchalance. I pressed further, describing how I'd searched everywhere and how important the ring was. This time, she lifted her eyes from the screen, meeting mine with a dismissive glance, her voice as smooth as ice. I told you, I haven't seen it. I wanted to believe her, to find comfort in her words, but there was something unsettling in the way she avoided my gaze, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her phone. I pushed down the surge of mistrust, but it gnawed at me, leaving an uncomfortable weight in my chest. My mind raced through possible scenarios, each more alarming than the last. Yet, confronting her with my suspicions felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to admit existed. Instead, I nodded slowly, swallowing the bitter taste of doubt, and decided to wait and watch. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy silence between us. I watched Lily closely, hoping for some sign or slip that might reveal the truth. But she carried on with her usual routine, acting as if everything were perfectly normal. I tried to distract myself, but the missing ring was like a drumbeat in the back of my mind, persistent and unyielding. One afternoon, while Lily was out, I felt an inexplicable urge to go through our shared desk drawer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe just some assurance or clue to ease my mind. That's when I found it, a small piece of paper folded and tucked away amidst bills and receipts. My heart skipped as I unfolded it. There it was, in black and white, a transaction receipt from a pawn shop, dated just days before the ring disappeared. The item description left no doubt. I felt a rush of heat rise to my face. The betrayal was undeniable. My initial shock quickly gave way to anger. I sat there for a moment, clutching the paper, the reality of Lily's actions crashing down on me like a wave. It wasn't just about the ring, it was the trust she had shattered, the family bond she had carelessly frayed. When Lily returned home, I was waiting. The receipt lay on the table between us, an unspoken accusation. She looked at it, then at me, her expression shifting from surprise to something pinched and defensive. I asked her, my voice steady but strained, how she could do this to us, to our family. Her response was dismissive at first, a flimsy facade of excuses and deflections. She claimed that she had no other choice, that she needed to clear her debt before it spiraled out of control. As she spoke, I could see the cracks in her resolve, the way her voice wavered despite her attempted indifference. I didn't argue, my silence speaking volumes. I let her words hang in the air, refusing to soften the sharp edges of her betrayal with my understanding. Her reasons were just that, reasons, not justifications. We stood there in that quiet, tense standoff until Lily finally broke, her shoulders slumping, the fight leaving her. Her apology was halting and full of remorse, but it did little to soothe the rawness of what she'd done. I listened, my heart heavy, knowing this was only the beginning of a long road to reconciliation. Yet, despite the hurt, a part of me recognized that she was still my sister, and that familial bond wasn't something easily severed. I couldn't just let it go, couldn't brush aside her actions as if they meant nothing. But I could try to find a way forward that didn't involve losing her entirely. With the ring still out there, a piece of our family's history hanging in the balance, I knew what I had to do next. It was a task I needed to undertake alone, a chance to reclaim not just the ring, but a sense of agency over what had been lost. I resolved to find the pawn shop, to confront the consequences head on, but I didn't tell Lily my plan. There was no need to involve her in that part of the journey. She would have to face her own consequences, her own path to redemption. As I left the house, determination surged through me. My steps were brisk, my mind set on retrieving our family's treasure, the tangible symbol of our heritage, and perhaps, in time, the unity we both needed to rebuild. The days that followed my discovery were drenched in heavy silence, a kind of suffocating tension that seemed to cling to the air around us. Lily and I didn't speak much, our interactions reduced to nods and brief glances, It was as if we were both treading carefully over thin ice, afraid of the inevitable crack beneath us. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. The ring had vanished without a trace, and despite Lily's denials, I couldn't dismiss the gnawing doubt inside me. It was there, simmering quietly but relentlessly, refusing to let me rest. My mind ran in circles, revisiting every conversation, every interaction, looking for a clue I might have missed. On the third day, alone in the house, I decided to do some tidying up, hoping the mundane task would offer some distraction. As I straightened papers on our shared desk, my fingers brushed against something half buried beneath a pile of forgotten mail. It was a receipt, its edges slightly crumpled, the paper thin and fragile from handling. My heart gave a sudden jolt as I recognized the name at the top, the pawnshop's address. I stood there, staring at the slip of paper, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and anger. A part of me had hoped, desperately, that I was wrong about her. But here it was, tangible evidence of her betrayal, laid bare in front of me. My hands shook slightly as I skimmed the details, each itemized line deepening the sense of loss that weighed on me. When the door swung open and Lily walked in, her expression shifted to one of practiced nonchalance. "What's up?" she asked, her voice a little too casual, as if she sensed no impending confrontation. "I found something interesting," I replied, holding up the receipt for her to see. The color drained from her face as her eyes darted to the paper and back to mine, caught between defiance and guilt. "Where did you get that?" She tried to sound indifferent, but I could hear the cracks in her facade, the tremor in her words. "Does it matter?" I said, not breaking eye contact. I waited, letting the silence grow until it was almost unbearable, demanding the truth without saying more. With a sigh, Lily's shoulders slumped. "I didn't know what else to do," she admitted, her voice small and filled with resignation. The words were out, and with them the last thread of doubt vanished, leaving only a cold, undeniable reality behind. The room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of everything unspoken. She launched into a hurried explanation, tales of debts piled high, of decisions made in desperation. But for all her words, the sting of betrayal was what lingered, prickling beneath my skin. I didn't argue. I didn't lash out. Her reasons, her justifications were her own. But they didn't change the fact that she'd taken something precious from us both. Something that couldn't simply be replaced or forgiven with an apology. "I had to," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter her resolve. There was a vulnerability there, but also a refusal to fully accept the gravity of what had been done. I watched her, feeling a mix of sadness and anger, a turbulent storm that refused to settle into any single emotion. I knew what I had to do next, knew that this moment was just one part of a larger journey, one that would bring me face to face with the consequences of her actions. "I'm going to get it back," I said, my voice steady, each word a promise to myself. "And you're going to have to make things right." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise mingling with something like relief. Perhaps she hadn't expected a chance at redemption, hadn't thought there would be any path forward from what she'd done. But I wasn't one to abandon hope entirely, not when it came to family, not when there was still a chance to reclaim what had been lost. With that, I turned away, leaving her to contemplate the road she would have to walk. My focus shifted to the task at hand, to the journey awaiting me, one where I would confront not just the shadow of her actions, but the opportunity to reclaim our family's treasure. I stepped out into the crisp air, the receipt clutched tightly in my hand, a map to what had been stolen, as much a guide as it was a reminder of what needed to be made whole once more. It was evening when I finally confronted Lily. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes flicking to the window as if looking for a way out. My chest felt heavy, the words I needed to say caught somewhere between my mind and my mouth. But I had to know. I deserved to hear it from her. Why she did it. Why she sold the ring. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. "Lily, I found the receipt," I said, laying down the crumpled evidence between us. Her eyes widened for a moment, then they fell to the table. I watched her, waiting for an answer. She didn't deny it, which was a small mercy, I suppose. But the silence hung between us, stretching like a taut wire, waiting to snap. At last she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I was in so much debt, I felt trapped. I wanted to understand, I truly did. But the betrayal cut deep, and it was hard to see past the hurt. Grandma's ring? Of all things, Lily, that ring meant everything to us." My voice cracked, the weight of my words pressing down on me. I had to look away, focusing on a chip in the paint on the wall just to steady myself. Her answer, though, was infuriating. I thought I could replace it, get it back before anyone noticed. Her tone held a tinge of desperation, but it did little to soften the blow. I sat down across from her, staring at the face that was so familiar, yet suddenly so foreign. Did you think? Did you think I wouldn't find out? I asked, my voice low. At first, I hoped you wouldn't, she admitted, her gaze fixed on her hands. But then it was too late. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't argue. The damage was done, and the echoes of her choices would linger long after our conversation ended. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of our family's legacy, something that I couldn't simply replace or forget. Lily was quiet for a moment, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice barely reaching my ears across the table. I made a mess of things. I leaned back, the truth settling over me like a chill. I had always thought of Lily as my ally, my confidant. This betrayal was unexpected, and my mind struggled to reconcile the sister I knew with the one who had sold a part of our history for a quick fix. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said, the words leaving me with a heaviness I hadn't anticipated. But it was the truth, and hiding from it wouldn't serve either of us. Lily's head snapped up, her eyes searching mine for something. Absolution, perhaps, or at least some glimmer of hope. I will find a way to make it right, she promised, more to herself than to me. I just need time. We sat there in silence, the chasm between us growing wider with each passing second. I felt the need to distance myself from the situation, to think without the shadow of her actions clouding my judgment. I'm going to get it back, I repeated, more to reaffirm my own resolve than anything else. And you're going to have to make things right. With those words, I stood, leaving her behind with the weight of her choices. The door closed softly behind me as I stepped into the evening air, the world outside seeming far more grounded than the tumult of emotions inside. My steps carried me away from the house, from the confusion and pain. I needed clarity and space to breathe. I wandered, the cool breeze helping to clear my mind, focusing on what needed to be done. It felt like I was piecing a puzzle back together, one where the final image was blurred by deceit. But I couldn't give up. Despite the hurt, the anger, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, a part of me held on to a thin thread of hope. Not just for the sake of the ring, but for Lily, for us. I had to believe there was redemption, even if it had to be earned the hard way. As the night deepened, the path ahead slowly became clearer, each step forward a testament to my resolve. I would find the way to reclaim the ring, and with it, perhaps, a sense of balance to the familial bond that had been so carelessly fractured. All I knew was that I couldn't leave things as they were, not when there was still a chance to mend what had been broken. And so, with a determined spirit, I steadied myself for the journey ahead, hoping that in time, we could find a way back to each other. The morning after confronting Lily, I sat quietly with a cup of coffee in my hands, staring out the window. It was a bleak day, reminiscent of the dull ache left in my heart. The betrayal still felt raw, like an open wound. Lily's excuses echoed in my mind, hollow and insincere. I wondered how desperation could lead someone so close to me to such a decision. Later that day, I sifted through my thoughts, trying to focus on a plan. I knew I couldn't just let it go. The ring was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a connection to our grandmother, a symbol of our family's history and love. Losing it felt like losing a part of her all over again. Determined not to let this be the end, I began researching local pawn shops, making a list of possibilities. Each name scribbled on paper was another step forward, another chance to reclaim what was rightfully ours. I started visiting pawn shops, moving from one to the next with a purpose. Some visits were fruitless, shop owners either uninterested or in their dismissal. Others offered faint glimmers of hope, hints about transactions that might have involved a ring similar to mine. It was a tedious process, but I found solace in the action. Each small step served as a balm to my frustration, a way to channel my pain into progress. One pawn shop stood out, a small, cramped space at the end of an alley. Something about its unassuming nature drew me in. The owner, a kind-eyed man who introduced himself as Peter, listened patiently as I recounted the story. There was something in his demeanor that made me feel heard, as if he understood the stakes involved. Peter paused, his gaze thoughtful. "I think I remember a ring like that," he said, sparking the first real hope I'd felt in days. He rummaged through a logbook, fingers skimming over pages, eventually landing on a transaction that seemed to match the timeline I provided. He looked up, a sincerity in his voice. If it's the one, I can hold it for you, but it won't be cheap. My heart sank, knowing I couldn't just conjure up the funds on the spot. I nodded, thanking him for the chance. We struck a deal. He'd keep the ring aside, giving me a window to gather the money. Leaving the shop, I took a breath of relief that was tempered by the task still ahead. Back home, I confronted Lily again. Her eyes were wary and not quite meeting mine. I told her about the ring, the pawn shop, and the arrangement with Peter. Her face remained impassive, but I wasn't looking for remorse anymore. I was, beyond anger, focused solely on what needed to be done. I made it clear to her that this was her mess to clean up. She'd have to earn the money back and repay the pawn shop. There was no argument from her, just a slight nod that barely acknowledged the weight of her actions. As the weeks passed, I noticed a change in Lily. She started working extra shifts, taking on freelance gigs, anything to scrape together the necessary amount. I watched from the sidelines, my emotions a mix of resentment and a faint, growing respect. She was doing it. She was owning up, slowly repairing the damage she'd caused. When the day finally came to retrieve the ring, I felt a bubbling mix of anticipation and anxiety. I entered the pawn shop, greeted by Peter's smile. Lily had given me the money, every last bit, her debt now paid in full. Peter placed the ring in my hand, its weight somehow heavier with the gravity of what it represented. Slipping it back onto my finger, I felt a profound sense of closure, as though a piece of my heart had been restored. Returning home, I found Lily waiting expectantly. Her eyes flickered to the ring, her face paling as she realized her scheme had truly come to an end. She didn't say much, and neither did I. Words felt unnecessary, drowned out by the understanding that actions had spoken louder. In the days that followed, I began to let go of the grip around my heart. I chose to forgive Lily, knowing it was as much for me as it was for her. But I made sure she understood that forgiveness didn't erase the memory of her betrayal or the lesson it taught. It was there, a quiet reminder of the bridge she needed to rebuild. Through it all, I learned that redemption is a journey marked by sincerity and effort, one where ultimate justice lies not in retribution but in reclamation. As for Lily and me, we had a long road ahead, but there was a chance for healing, a hope that someday our bond could be stronger than the breach that once threatened to break it. The air felt thick, and as I made my way to the pawn shop, it was a small, unassuming place tucked between a laundromat and a bakery, its windows dimly lit and cluttered with trinkets. Inside, the owner stood behind the counter, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a weary smile. I stepped forward, my heart racing, but my exterior and calm. I explained the situation as plainly as I could, concealing the swirl of emotions underneath. I spoke of my grandmother's ring, its sentimental value, the betrayal that had led me here. He listened, nodding slowly, his expression shifting from polite interest to genuine concern. When I finished, he took a moment, as if weighing the truth of my words. Then, in a tone that softened the edges of my anxiety, he agreed to help. He promised to hold the ring, giving me the chance to reclaim it before it disappeared into someone else's hands. Relief swept over me, a quiet sigh escaping as I thanked him, determined to make things right. The negotiation was simple, nearly anticlimactic. We discussed the price, reaching an agreement that felt as fair as possible under the circumstances. As I turned to leave, he wished me luck, his kindness a balm to the rawness of my hurt. Outside, a light drizzle had begun. It tapped softly against my skin, grounding me as I made my way back home. I clutched the receipt tightly, a tangible reminder of the task ahead. My thoughts spun around Lily, the sister I had trusted implicitly, now the source of this gnawing wound. Back at the house, I paused at the door, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew awaited. When I stepped inside, the silence between us spoke volumes. I saw her eyes flicker to the ring, now securely back where it belonged, its presence a silent accusation. She didn't say much, her apologies worn and threadbare. I didn't argue or demand explanations. The wrong had been done, and the ring's return was proof enough of the boundaries she had crossed. I watched her closely, noticing the tremble in her hands, the tightening of her lips. Inside, I wished for a connection strong enough to help us navigate through the betrayal, but I knew it wouldn't come easily. Trust rebuilt from ashes takes time and sincerity, something more enduring than a simple apology. I told Lily of my arrangement with the pawn shop, my voice steady as I outlined her responsibility to pay back the debt herself. She listened quietly, knowing better than to protest the fairness of this requirement. Her face betrayed a struggle between indignation and reluctant acceptance. For days, there was little more than this quiet tension between us. Lily began working extra hours, determined to earn back the money she owed. Watching her, I hoped this would teach her the value of honesty, the fragile nature of trust. Healing was a slow, deliberate process. Each day felt like an unsteady step towards something better, yet uncertain. I clung to the hope that through this storm, clarity would emerge for both of us. At last, the day came when Lily made her final payment to the pawn shop owner. She handed me the confirmation, an offering of sorts, her eyes searching mine for some flicker of forgiveness. I accepted it quietly, feeling a cautious warmth seep back into my heart, a gentle reassurance that we were on the right path. In the weeks that followed, I saw changes in Lily, small but significant. She was more mindful, her actions reflecting a newfound understanding of the weight her choices carried. It wasn't quick or easy, but it was progress, each step reinforcing the bond we were slowly rebuilding. The ring gleamed brightly on my finger, a testament to the lessons learned and the resilience found within us both. I knew we still had a long way to go, but with the truth between us and a shared commitment to repair the damage done, there was hope. Hope for a future where trust wasn't given lightly but rather nurtured with care, a future where family meant standing by each other even when the path blurred and faltered, where forgiveness was more than a word. It was a promise of understanding, of moving forward together despite the past that had once threatened to tear us apart. When Lily saw the ring back on my finger, her face turned pale, her eyes widening in disbelief. The shock etched into her features was unmistakable, a silent acknowledgement that her scheme had unraveled. She stood there, rooted to the spot, while I maintained a stance, waiting for her to find her voice. "Lily," I said, keeping my voice steady but distant, "I have the ring back." Her lips parted, but no words came. Just the silence between us, heavy and like a string pulled taut, ready to snap. I watched as she struggled to form a coherent sentence, my patience wearing thin with each passing moment. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice almost a whisper. "How did you—" I could hear the confusion tangled within her question, the realization dawning slowly, like a sunrise. I wanted to feel triumphant, but instead, there was just a dull ache of disappointment. "Did you go to the—" Her question off, left unfinished, as though completing it would solidify the betrayal in the air between us. "I did what you couldn't," I replied, my voice laden with the weight of what that meant. "I retrieved what was ours to begin with. I went to the pawn shop and spoke to the owner. He was understanding. More understanding than I felt at that moment, truth be told. But I kept that sentiment to myself, locking it away with the rest of my hurt." Her eyes fell to the ground, shame painting her cheeks a bright red. It was a long moment before she looked up again, her gaze searching for something, anything in my expression. "I'm sorry," she said, the apology weak but earnest. The sound of it stung, the echoes of her betrayal still raw and fresh in my mind. I nodded, acknowledging her words without dismissing the gravity of her bup. "It's not enough, Lily," I said, my voice carrying the weight of finality with it. "Sorry won't help us rebuild the trust we've lost." She flinched as though the words themselves struck her, but I didn't relent. This needed to be said, needed to be out in the open where we couldn't pretend it away. "You'll need to pay back the pawn shop," I continued, my tone, leaving no room for argument or evasion. "With your own money. It's not just about the ring, Lily. It's about what was broken." She nodded, the fight seemingly drained from her as the reality of her actions set in. There was a quiet moment, a lull in the storm of emotions that had raged between us. The air felt, with words unspoken, the space between us both a chasm and a bridge to something healing. I turned away, giving her space to process, to understand the gravity of the path she had set us both on. In the days that followed, I watched as Lily began to work feverishly, taking on extra shifts, her determination growing with each passing day. There was a strength in her resolve, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see the cost of what had transpired. Every time she handed over a payment to the pawn shop, I saw the lessons of responsibility and accountability etching themselves into the very fabric of who she was. It was a process, and often painful but necessary all the same, a path that required her to dig deep, to confront the parts of herself she had long ignored. The ring on my finger felt heavier than before, a reminder of what she had done and what I was trying to forgive. Each glance at it was an exercise in kindness, a silent testimony to the tangled web of family and betrayal that we were striving to untangle. Lily's own transformation mirrored in her actions, a gradual shedding of her old ways, replaced with newfound letters. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, as they say. But watching her try, watching her genuinely want to be better, somehow made it all feel more bearable. There were days when the bitterness would rise within me, unbidden, threatening to spill over into our reconciliation. But I would quell it, reminding myself why I had decided on this course of action. Not just for me, but for her, for us. With time, our conversations became easier, less charged with tension and more filled with understanding. Each exchange like a small stitch in the fabric of what had been torn apart. Her apologies, once and fraught, became unburdened by hollow excuses or empty platitudes. Slowly, ever so slowly, the landscape of our relationship began to change. It wasn't all at once, nor was it without its hitches, but there was progress, a tangible, in how we related to one another. I noticed how she'd start to make small gestures. A coffee ready on the counter when I returned home late, a wrapped gift on my birthday. Her offerings meant as expressions of goodwill. Gradually, that cautious warmth seeped back into my heart, the edges of my resentment smoothing out like the gentle ebb of a tide. I learned to let go, not because she asked, but because I needed to, for my own peace and for the sake of what we could become beyond betrayal. Together, we began to rebuild our lives around this new understanding, a foundation not just in shared blood, but also in the hard-earned trust we'd fought tooth and nail to reclaim. The ring was back where it belonged, its gleam a reminder of resilience and forgiveness. And in that gleam, I saw the promise of a future. One where family meant more than proximity. One where love, fortified by trials, was dire. A future where betrayals of the past slowly loosened their grip, making space for far more enduring. As days turned into weeks, the tension between Lily and me slowly eased, even though the initial wound of betrayal remained fresh. I knew I had my grandmother's ring back, nestled securely on my finger, but it was important that Lily truly understood the consequences of her actions. We had a long conversation one night, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. The dim light cast shadows on her face, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. It was time for her to make amends not just with me, but with herself. "You'll need to pay back the pawnshop. It can't be my burden to bear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. At first, Lily seemed taken aback, her lips parting in surprise. But then she nodded thoughtfully, a flicker of determination crossing her face. She had to do this not just for me, for our family's heirloom, but also to regain her own sense of dignity. She agreed to take on more hours at her job, and little by little she put away every cent she could spare. I watched her efforts with silent approval, noticing the changes not just in her demeanor, but in how she approached life with a newfound sense of responsibility. She no longer spent impulsively. Her frugality was a testament to her commitment to making things right. One afternoon, she handed me an envelope, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and humility. It contained the final payment for the pawnshop. As I accepted it, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The room went silent, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was one filled with unspoken understanding. That evening, I drove to the pawnshop, handed over the money, and finally closed the chapter on that painful episode. As I returned home, the tranquility I felt was profound. What had once been a symbol of deceit now stood as a testament to forgiveness, growth, and the strength of family ties. Lily and I began to forge a new relationship, cautiously building it with patience and care. Each small gesture she made, every thoughtful action, was a brick in the wall we were reconstructing between us. My heart, once heavy with resentment, now felt lighter, buoyed by the restoration of trust. The ring, with its gleaming surface, became not just a reminder of the past, but a beacon of the future we could shape together. Its brilliance mirrored the resilience that we both discovered within ourselves. And in that shared journey, I found a renewed faith, not just in Lily, but in the power of redemption. As time went on, our relationship strengthened. We were not the same sisters we had been before, and perhaps that was a good thing. We had grown, separately and together, learning what it truly meant to love, even when it was difficult. In the end, it wasn't the ring, but our shared experiences that solidified our bond, making it unbreakable by any future trials. I learned that forgiveness was a gift I could give myself. It was a release from the shackles of anger and disappointment. With Lily's determination to right her wrongs, I found a new kind of courage, a courage to let go and to move forward. Looking back, I realized that betrayal had taught me more about the strength of the human spirit than I could have imagined. It taught me that love, when tested and fortified, could endure beyond the shadows of doubt, and in that endurance, I found peace.